To the camera, could you state who you are? And
Yeah, am I going to be talking to the camera the whole time?
You can talk to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Rhea Rippey. Not sure how much you need here.
What division you served in?
Let me give you a quick background on that because I think it's important.
Yes, sir.
I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division. I'm going to look at you if that's all right.
Yeah.
1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam. Since Vietnam is known as the first helicopter war, it was pretty important because the 1st Cav was the first air mobile division on the planet. Prior to that, down at Fort Benning, they had done extensive tests and training using helicopters to see if helicopters could be used tactically on the battlefield. They weren't sure. Department of Defense wanted to know, is this a possibility? So that task was given to Benning. They established a group called the 11th Air Assault Group that did nothing but just test. If we used helicopters, what do we need? How do we establish an SOP, a standing operating procedure? How do we do this? How do we go about putting these pieces parts together? Once they decided we got to go here, then the 1st Cavalry Division, the 11th Air Assault test became the 1st Cavalry Division. So when the 1st Cav went to Vietnam, they went with the first load of helicopters ever to be deployed as a divisional size unit. There were 16,500 guys in the 1st Cav, and we went over with about 500 helicopters, plus or minus, I think plus. For the first time, the Cav got into combat with helicopters. The 1st Cavalry Division, speaking modestly, I had nothing to do with this, but 1st Cav had got an excellent reputation in combat, always kicked ass, always was successful, and developed an enormous reputation because we were the first guys to do it. Then I came along a couple of years later after they had been there in combat and had amended the SOP, and we really got into full swing with it. And so it was a major unit doing a major job, and we did all of the division size heavy lifting that was done in Vietnam. After the Cav proved that it was successful and that these tactics could work, then the 101st Airborne Division became an air mobile division, and they basically were a carbon copy of what we had done in terms of organization. And so now we had two, and that was the way this whole thing came about. So I was lucky enough. I did everything I could to get assigned to the 1st Cav because I knew that's where the action was going to be, and it was. So my experiences there are not theoretical. We did nothing but combat assaults, medevacs, resupplies, ammunition, water, reinforcements. We hauled in the artillery batteries. We hauled in the ammunition for the artillery batteries. We hauled out the wounded. We were right there. So fortunately, my service in Vietnam was at the cutting edge, and so I have strong opinions about what we're going to be talking about.
And what year were you deployed to Vietnam?
I went in '69, in spring of '69. 69-70 was the peak. That was the high water mark for the number of troops in Vietnam, and I was also lucky enough to be there as we crossed the peak and started down the other side when Vietnamization was brought in. We were going to transfer all the action to the Vietnamese. Slowly pull back, and let them take the missions.
And were you drafted, or did you?
Oh no, I joined. I volunteered. I'm a Tennessee volunteer.
Specific reason that you decided to enlist that stands out?
Couple of reasons. One, I was miserable at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I did not like it. It was not a good fit for me. I was very confused about where my life was heading at that point. I seemed to have a lot of options, but I needed to tighten the focus. And I was in NROTC at Vanderbilt. I remember a very interesting conversation I had with one of my instructors who had been a naval aviator operating off carriers. And I explained to him what all was going on and how unhappy I was. And he said, "You need to talk to the commanding officer." So I made an appointment to talk to the commanding officer at NROTC there. He was a Marine colonel, classic poster boy for the Marines. I mean, white side walls. He was. I walked into his office. Everything was nailed down. And so I just had the same conversation with him. I said, "Sir, I'm not proud of this, but I've got no traction going here. I'm not happy. I don't like the people. I don't like the instructors. I don't like the attitude." And he said, "Son, you need to go burn off some fields in Vietnam." And this is a true story. I actually said to him, "Sir, where is Vietnam?" Now, I had heard I knew that there was something going on there, but it was always referred to as Indochina. And I wasn't really sure where Indochina was on the map, didn't really care that much, but that burrowed into my brain like a nuclear worm. I mean, there was almost an explosion in my head when he said that. So subsequently, after that, I thought about it, mulled it over, and decided, you know what, I think this guy's got the right idea here. So I volunteered to go to Vietnam. I volunteered for infantry, I volunteered for airborne, and I volunteered for Army. I didn't want to be arbitrarily assigned to Navy or Air Force. Didn't care that much about the Marines, but that would have been okay. But that was the reason I volunteered. My father was a World War II guy. Yeah. His brothers were World War II guys. Their neighbors were World War II guys. That's what you did. When the nation needs you, it's a contract. You get all these opportunities laid out before you, but there's also the other side of that coin is there's a responsibility to do what you can for the country if the country needs you. Like Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I believe that. Sounds sappy as hell in 2018 when everybody is throwing mud at everybody else and calling everybody extremists if you don't agree with them. But back in those days, and there's another point too, back in those days you trusted your government. That seems so outmoded now.
Yeah, and Vietnam was obviously the first war where the media was actually in the war.
Oh yes.
With embedded reporters.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any experience with?
Had one experience with an embed. It wasn't really an embed, but the battalion commander called me up and said, "We've got a reporter coming this afternoon. I want you to take care of him. Show him around." At that point, I was a staff officer, and so this guy shows up, and I said, "How can I help?" And he said, "I'd like to talk to some people who are against the war." And I thought, I'm sure my jaw must have dropped because I don't consider that an objective approach. If he wanted to talk to some people, I would have been happy to get some people together, but he wanted to talk to people who were opposed to the war. And I said, "You're going to have to find them. I've got some other things I need to be doing," and I spun around and left him. That was my sole personal contact with a media person. But by that time, you have to understand, by that time we had all had a belly full of what they were doing and how they were affecting public opinion and how they were exaggerating and spinning. So I wanted nothing to do with it, and I was prepared to suffer the wrath of the battalion commander to disconnect from that. So that's my only really personal experience.
you'd say most of the guys you served with, almost all of them were pro-war. Were there any that
Well,
were outgoingly anti-war?
you know, when you say pro-war or anti-war, those are really loaded phrases, and I say that because when an individual decides to leave his family and leave his culture and leave his friends and train up in order to go and fight for the country, that presupposes that there are other factors here other than, do I like war or do I not like war? You will never find a more virulently anti-war group of people in your life than guys who have to go and do this. I mean, this is a nasty process. The environment is nasty. The killing is nasty. The wounded is nasty. The blood is nasty. The dirt and the sweat is nasty. And the fear is nasty. I mean, nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But I had to set that aside and face the fact that if I'm not doing this, my country has asked me to do it, my commander-in-chief has asked me to do it, the chain of command has asked me to do it. If I don't do this, who exactly is going to be doing this now? So honestly, I think if you could possibly line up 1,000 veterans and ask them the same question, you're probably going to get a lot of different answers. But in terms of supporting the war or understanding the basis for the war, I think most of us did. I think we understood that the domino theory was more than just an academic theory.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this movie before. You know, communism has tried to challenge and has succeeded in some cases, has challenged capitalism before in lots of different countries. The most recent was Korea. We had the Soviet Union and China supporting North Korea in their attempt to take over the whole country. Okay, that was clear-cut case of communist aggression. Now, we've got China and we've got Russia supporting North Vietnam against aggression pointed toward South Vietnam. Now, I'd love it if somebody could really give me the difference here. It seemed to us at the time that the domino theory was correct. If you let Vietnam go, then what's next door? You got Laos, you got Cambodia, you got Thailand. Now, Thailand is the big prize in Southeast Asia. I mean, that's the most productive country that over there. And we had to draw a line to stop this. And we all, I think most of us agreed that it had to be done. It was a dirty job, it had to be done. And we just wish we'd been given the opportunity to complete the job.
Okay.
One second. Can I get you to move the microphone to the other side of the phone?
Sure.
Because sometimes it's rubbing against it.
Oh, okay. You want to put it inside?
Oh, just
Is that what you're saying?
On your left side.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to see how this works here. Okay. And let me turn it. Okay, that should be clear. How's it? Is that good?
And going back to the one reporter that you had experience with,
Yeah.
he was obviously trying to push away the certain majority agenda, perhaps amongst the shoulders of believing on what you were doing. How do you feel about him only focusing on the anti-war and trying to push that to the American people?
Well, I think a more objective approach would be: could we get together? Let's just say 10 people, and we can just sit down and just see how many people feel this way, how many people feel that way. What are the nuances? What are the variations? You know, that's open-minded. That's objective. That's reporting. Going in, zeroing in on only people who are opposed to the war, I don't connect with how that is objective reporting. and I resented it. So, for better or worse, I decided to leave the guy. I said, look around, go meet some people. You got it. I'm busy.
And obviously, the same media that wanted to focus on the anti-war, they portrayed it as unwinnable, perhaps, in
yes.
America. How did that make you feel?
Oh, well, it's just absurd. I mean, we had the capability of knocking that thing out in 6 months if they gave us the green light. I mean, there was no question about it. The North Vietnamese did not win a single battle of any significance during the entire 15 years we were there. Now, I'm not talking about an ambush here or an action over there. I'm talking about an engagement that actually carried significance, tactical or strategic significance. Zero. We chewed them up and spit them out every time we had an engagement with these guys. And that's what was so maddening about it. And we pick up Time magazine and read about how this is not working and how there's 100,000 people on the streets and they want us out because we can't win. Can't win? You haven't given us a chance yet. You've got all these restrictions about what you can do, what you can't do. There's no fire zones there. There's no fire zones here. You got to be fired on before you can return. I mean, it's just nonsense, just crazy. And there was, of course, no effort to interdict their supply lines at all. And that's one of the first things you do in warfare. You cut off the other guy's oxygen. Oh, we can't do that. Well, what if we bombed a supply train from China coming down south? What if we did that and we killed some Chinese? Well, what if we kill some Soviet sailors bringing some supplies in to Haiphong Harbor? Well, we can't do that. Well, what do you mean we can't do that? That's what diplomats are for. Diplomats are to sit down at a table and say, look, dude, you got people coming in, you're sending supplies in, and those supplies are killing our people. Now we're going to give you 15 days. So you do what you need to do in 15 days, but on day number 16, any trains that are coming out of China with military supplies on them, or any naval vessels coming in with military supplies on them, are going to be bye-bye. That's the way you fight a war. But no, we've got to fight it differently. We've got to shackle ourselves. We've got to say, okay, we're going to draw a line. Now, we can't go outside that line, but you guys can do whatever you want to on the other side, and you can cross that line. So we're going to be defensive, and we're going to adapt to whatever you bring in, but we're going to respect that line. And that line, by the way, I was assigned to a place named Tay Ninh. Look it up on a map. It's surrounded on 3 sides by Cambodia, and those guys, and we could push them to the line, but we couldn't go beyond. Beyond the line, guess what they had? They had an enormous supply dump over there. They had an enormous resupply hospital operation. They had everything. This was their command and control. They were just kicking back. Whenever we blooded them up, they went back and patched their wounds and trained up and got resupplied and came back. And we couldn't do a thing. That is not a war. That's a political game of some kind. And we lost 58,000 people playing that game.
Do you feel like the public understanding of the war being unwinnable played a role in hindering the military's ability to, I guess, attack the Russians and Chinese that were supplying?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was, the high command didn't even consider that. Johnson didn't even, this goes to the White House. The brainiacs in the White House, the best and the brightest, these guys who were supposed to have all the answers, that's where that stopped. No, you can't do that. That's off the table. Don't even think about that. Let's just engage them after they have trained and organized and equipped and come down in an offensive mode. Then you can deal with them. But if they turn around and go back, take a break and wait for the next time.
Do you think the commanders of the war acted in a way maybe that wasn't for the interests of the army, but for the interests of the American public, where the public could palate it?
Well, yeah, I think basically what you're asking is was politics dominant in the decisions that were made? And without question, politics was the determinant. We had to do it a certain way, and we have to restrain our military. But please minimize casualties. Please don't cause American casualties, and don't cause civilian casualties, and do whatever you can do. But we're not going to let you. We're not going to give you the green light.
Did you ever come back to America while the war was still going on?
Only when I finished my tour.
Okay, and
that was the most bizarre thing you can imagine.
What was your immediate reaction when you saw how, basically, what Americans were seeing on TV? How did you feel about that when you came back for the whole war?
Well, that's kind of a two-part thing. For me personally, I flew back into Travis Air Force Base, so I didn't have to deal with the abuse that these guys put up with coming back through civilian terminals. Especially in California, they had organized protesters who would. I have a friend who had dog feces thrown on him. There were all kinds of verbal and sometimes physical abuse surrounding that. I was lucky because I came back to an Air Force base and it was none of that. So there's that aspect of it, and then there's the wider aspect of reintegrating into a culture that has been programmed to believe that if you're a Vietnam veteran, you are a baby killer and you are a druggie. Those two are just automatic, and beyond that, you're probably pretty whack job. And not to be trusted, and you've done dirty things, and you know. So when we came back, there was no real discussion with many people about what was going on. Everybody just kind of came back and kind of went underground and just kept a real low profile. When I say underground, I just mean low profile. No big discussion, no big, unless somebody asked. I mean, there were individuals who would ask, but generally the attitude was, okay, you're back, good. Let's continue on with where we were before this whole thing started. I didn't appreciate any of that. I mean, I'm not looking for big parades. They talk about parades. I don't care about being in a parade and having ticker tape on me. But I would have appreciated a little bit of, wow, from what we saw on TV, you've been into some deep stuff here. Glad you made it, and maybe even congratulations, instead of just contempt, distance.
After the war, did you conceal the fact that you were a soldier in the war?
I didn't promote it. I didn't go out of my way to make people aware. As a matter of fact, if my wife were here right now, she'd say, you're kind of disseminating a little bit. You pretty much went incognito. And I think she's right. She would have been right. What would be the point? I was so raw at that point that I didn't seek any kind of negative interaction with anybody. I didn't trust myself. We had been in a meat grinder, and my country did not understand that. They didn't understand the reality of what we were asked to do and the professionalism with which we did it and the success that we had in doing it and the total domination we placed on the enemy. They didn't understand any of that. It was baby killing and drug use, and then of course, Cali comes along and does his thing at My Lai, which was just a terrible event hurt. It hurt us deeply for an American officer to be involved in a killing of civilians like that. It was terrible. The only positive aspect of that was, and I'm very proud of this, a guy in a helicopter stopped it. He saw what was going on, he checked it out, he saw what was going on, he landed between the guys doing the shooting and the civilians. He landed his helicopter and said, no, we're not doing this. So I have a lot of respect for him, and he did what I think all the rest of us would have done had we seen that. But Callie, My Lai gave us a terrible black eye. Yeah, you see what Americans are doing. You see, totally overlooking the vastly larger killings of civilians that the North was doing. Didn't make a mention of that. Either minimized it or didn't talk about it at all. I kind of got off point. I'm sorry, but
that was great.
So
basically, the media would latch on to things such as My Lai and sort of talking points like baby killers.
Oh yeah.
That
Oh yeah.
didn't particularly have anything to do with the big picture, but it was easy to change people's opinions with those.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're reading that.
Can I get, when you ask a question just about the media, would you quickly just be like, just mention the question in your answer so we can
Oh, okay.
Just like
Okay.
a simple, like
Sure.
the media would portray as something like that.
Sure.
Thank
You want to back up and start?
you. Yeah, you start that question again.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the media latched on to things like the My Lai massacre and talking points like baby killers to sort of delegitimize what y'all were doing in the war.
Yes, the media did take advantage of every negative possibility and expand on it. You would give it much more emphasis than it deserved. For example, you mentioned the baby killers and the drug usage. I can tell you without any reservation, I never saw a Vietnamese baby. The full 12 months I was there, I was operating out of a big military base, flying combat missions out in the jungles and various areas. I never saw a Vietnamese baby to kill one, even if I had been of a mind to do that. And why would I have done that? I mean, we took huge, expended huge energy in trying to minimize any possibility of civilian casualties. I mean, we're not there to fight civilians. We're there to fight uniformed enemy troops who are firing at us. So, so the baby killing thing is just, were babies killed? I'm sure. But I mean, was this a policy? Was this something we did on a regular basis? I mean, no, none of that. And as for the drug usage, the reason the press harped on the drug usage is because that's where they were. They were back in Saigon. They were back in the rear areas where there was nothing going on in terms of warfare. There was no shooting going on. They were back there. And those troops back there, some of them lived in villas. I mean, I'm sleeping on a cot, surrounded by sandbags piled up to try to minimize shrapnel, and these guys are living in civilian quarters down there. Now, I suspect there was a lot of drug usage going on there. When I say a lot, I mean marijuana and hash and that sort of thing among those troops, because they had no responsibility on them. We had to go out every day and fly these missions. Do you think, what kind of fool would I or any of us have been to say, oh yeah, old Joe Blow over here, he's smashed on his rear end, and yeah, come on, let's go. I mean, we don't want somebody like that involved in a military operation. I mean, could kill us all. So yeah, they really harped on that because that's what they knew. They were back in Saigon. They were back, going to French restaurants, and I'm sure they saw a lot of that. I'm sure they did a lot of it themselves. But that's, of course, not part of the story that they're going to cover.
So we're talking about a lot of misinformation from the media. Did you ever, or sort of immediately after the war, did you ever see any accurate reporting, perhaps, or any legitimate portrayal of the war?
I can't say that I never saw anything that was objective. No, I can't say that. I'm trying desperately to remember right now to give you a good example, but nothing comes to my mind. But I tend to read a lot, and I tend to try to stay informed, and I read a lot of the reporting, and it was all so tinged. It was either outright wrong or it was tinged. You can tell half-truths, and you can sell half-truths, because people hear the half that they think is correct, and then they'll accept the other half as being correct, even if they don't know it's correct. But the general theme was, we're baby killers and murderers. We have no reason to be there. It's a civil war. We're interfering in a civil war, after all. Rather than objectively report what the hell they knew about it. They knew that Ho Chi Minh was a communist. They knew he had been trained in Russia. He started a communist movement in France. He was very instrumental in that. This guy supported communist policies and mass killings and indoctrinations and all of the stuff that happened. Assassinations in villages in South Vietnam, killing the leaders who were not leaning toward the communists. He supported all that stuff, but in the media you would think, this kindly gentleman here, he is just so friendly and so outgoing, and why, he's just a grandfather. He's a grandfather to the country. All he wants is to reunite the country. And that's what the media chose to pitch. Meanwhile, we're down here supporting a corrupt regime in South Vietnam. These people, they don't deserve our support. What are we doing? Pouring all of our money into here. It's just a civil war, and we're interfering in it, and that's just flatly wrong. Flatly wrong.
Are there any stories or headlines that the American media use that stand out to you as egregiously just wrong and misinformed? Any individual ones that perhaps...
Individual stories?
Yeah, ones that just made you...